The Satan figure that's in the garden, and then the one that tempts Jesus in the wilderness, how does that potentially fit into the spiritual hierarchy that we see amongst like the ones that have dominion over the various nations and whatnot?
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful we would start out with such a simple question. If you think back to the three rebellions idea, each of the rebellions has a cost. And with respect to the first one, we have the figure in the garden, the supernatural rebel, who will become known eventually as Satan and the devil and a bunch of other titles as well. Because of his rebellion, we have death. We didn't have death before, so Eden is no more. Eden is ruined. We don't have everlasting life with God anymore, so we have estrangement from God and death. Now, because of that, in the Hebrew Bible, you do not have this figure referred to specifically as it relates to the events of Genesis 3. But what you do have is you have in so many places, both the evidence of the outcome of his rebellion and also you have anti-Eden. What I mean by that is opposite Eden imaging to remind people of the ruination of Eden. That's kind of a convoluted way to start here, but I mention that for a specific reason. It's a fact that in Genesis 3, we have the serpent. Okay, the serpent is never called Satan in Genesis 3. The serpent is actually never called Satan anywhere in the Hebrew Bible. The serpent is only called Satan in the book of Revelation, which is the last book of the New Testament. So, critical scholars, again, those who either don't have any theological sensitivity or, frankly, just love to destroy people's faith, they're not necessarily the same person there. They love to point this out and say things like, the Bible doesn't really know of a figure called Satan until the last book, and there's no relationship here to Genesis 3, and a lot of this Satan stuff is made up, and blah, 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 blah. They try to create contradictions between the two testaments. And I reject that, not surprisingly, acknowledging that we don't have a devil figure that goes by the term Satan, the title Satan, in the Old Testament. I'm well aware of that. You might think, well, what about Job 1 and 2? In Job 1 and 2, you have the Hebrew noun Satan. Hebrew is like English. English does not tolerate the definite article, the word the, in front of a proper personal name. The language doesn't include that in its rules, and neither does English. So I'm not the Mike. It sounds stupid. I say the exception to this is Donald Trump. He gets to be the Donald, okay? But ordinarily, this is not, what you see going on. So if the definite article in Job 1 and 2 precedes the word Satan, that tells you it's not a proper personal name. Every occurrence of Satan in Job 1 and 2, Zechariah 3, has the definite article. That means this is not Satan proper name. It means it should be translated the accuser, or the adversary, or the opponent, or the challenger. I mean, there's any number of ways you could render this. But none of that has anything to do with Genesis 3. Now, if you go into Second Temple Judaism, though, and by the time you get to the New Testament, the original rebel is perceived as the arch-ruler of everything. He's the god of this world, to quote Paul in 2 Corinthians 4. He's the ruler of the prince of the power of the air, and all these titles, these lofty titles. So the question is, how does this guy get preeminence, and why? There's a couple of reasons that emerge from, again, some of these other texts. These texts are useful, even if they're not in the Bible, because they tell you how readers of the Bible were processing these kinds of questions, and what passages in the Hebrew Bible they were looking at to process the questions the way they did. So it's very useful. It's like reading a commentary in some sense. And so the answer that you get is, he gets street cred from being the first to challenge God and oppose what God wants to do. But the real reason he gets preeminence is because all of the other ones know, the principalities and powers know that, we can do what we want here to these people. We can abuse them all day long. We can have them destroy themselves. But at the end of the day, everything dies. They all die, which means they all go to the realm of the dead where this guy is king. Because in the garden story, the rebel is cast down to the ground. The term is eretz, which is the normal term for earth, but eretz is also one of the terms for the underworld. This is why we have an underworld. This is why we have a realm of the dead. Because this one, through his rebellion and deceiving the humans and their rebellion, now we have death. Now they're going to die for the first time, and they go to a place. They don't cease to exist in terms of their spirits. So they go to the new realm of the dead, and guess who runs the show there? It's this guy. He wanted to be in charge. He wants to be the one that makes the rules. He wants to oppose God's plan. He has a better idea. Well, in the curse, he is actually put beneath the hooves of the animals. He's not only cast down to the ground, he's like under them. So he wants to be at the highest level, now you're at the lowest level. This is your domain now. And yes, you are the God of this world because now everything dies. Everything is going to wind up at your house on your doorstep. And so the other ones know that at the end of the day, this one has ultimate authority because everything will die. Again, that's why he emerges as the one who is perceived as causing the most harm and whose rebellion has the greatest reach. He therefore has the most authority over the world of humans because now they all die. That, in a nutshell, is the relationship of the Genesis 3 thing to the sort of cosmic hierarchy. But it actually doesn't have anything to do specifically with Job 1 and 2. Now, let's go back there. This is sort of like the Elohim discussion. We have been taught, for some reason, again, it's just tradition, that somehow we get unnerved by the thought that we don't have the devil in Job 1 and 2 because we've always been taught that. And we get unnerved by the observation that's very simple to confirm. Just, the serpent is never called Satan. Well, that must mean there's a contradiction. No, you know what it means? It means that biblical writers are under no obligation to use the same words to describe the same guy. Where's the cosmic rule that says every time we talk about anti-Eden, or the undoing of Eden, or death, that we have to use the word Satan, or the word serpent? Who made up that rule? Why is it that we have to use the same vocabulary in all these passages? Is there a cosmic rule that says we can't come up with other terms to refer to the same rebel over the course of time that fit, that aptly describe him? This is actually what you see in the Second Temple period texts. The rebel of Eden, Genesis 3, the supernatural one, gets called a number of things in between the Testaments. He does get called Satan there. It starts to be used as a proper name. This is when we have the transition outside the Hebrew Bible. But then it takes the form of mastema. Again, I'm not going to bore you with Hebrew noun formation. I mean, that would put you out, okay? But you take Satan, which is a related word to Satan, to oppose. When you want to make it a noun, you put an M in front of it. So we have mastema. Okay, that becomes a title in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's used. Belial, the worthless one. That's not an Old Testament term. We can't call the rebel of Genesis 3 Belial because there's a cosmic rule that says we can only use the word Satan. Really? Why? Again, there is no rule like that. So we have Mastema, we have Belial. Beliar is a derivative. We have Beelzebul, which is actually a really interesting one. Beelzebul is Canaanite. Beel is Baal. Zebul is the word for prince. Okay, Baal becomes sort of a primary source figure for Satan imagery. Why? Because Baal is Lord of the dead in Canaanite religion. He also thinks he's the ruler of the nations. Prince Baal. I mean, the Gospels refer to the devil, to Satan, as Beelzebul. This is why. Diabolos, devil, the deceiver, the liar, the slanderer, more literally. Okay, all of these terms fit. If the shoe fits, let's let him wear them. And Satan in Greek doesn't have the rule about the definite article. You can have ha, like ha Jesus. It's not the Jesus, it's just Jesus. Greek tolerates a definite article in front of a proper personal name. Hebrew does not, just like English. Languages are different. So by the time you get into the Greek-speaking world, which is in between the Testaments, the Hellenistic period, I hate to bring up history of Civ because you all wanted to forget that in high school as soon as you had it, but the Hellenistic era is a big deal. The world becomes Greek-speaking. And with that, the language has more elasticity. And so Satanas can become a proper personal name in a Greek-speaking world, and it does. And since the New Testament's written in Greek, they use that. This is all you have. You don't have a contradiction between the Testaments. You have a supernatural rebel in Genesis 3 that brings the ruination of Eden and death and estrangement from God, and over time he gets called lots of things. They're all appropriate. That's it. But again, if I was a religion teacher at a typical undergraduate institution, and I have a bunch of Christians in my Religion 101 class, oh, I can't wait to talk about this. You know, in 60 minutes, I'm going to have you thinking your Bible is ridiculous and full of contradictions. I'm going to give you textual dilemmas like this, and I'm not going to unpack them for you at all, because I want to destroy your faith. This is easy. You know, don't get the impression that every professor of religion or biblical studies that isn't a Christian is like this. They're not. Most of them are apathetic toward issues of faith. I mean, they're not there to intentionally harm people, but there are some that are. They live for it. I have met them. They're out there. You know, and the solution to this, again, is to teach people, you know, especially, you know, high school and stuff like this, to get them ready for these kinds of things that they're going to have in their religion class. Because what a coincidence, they're forced to take this class. Oh, who would have thought that, you know? Well, again, there's an agenda here. So I probably got a little far afield with that, but there is a role for that, and there is a logic as to why this one gets elevated in terms of the understanding that you get in the New Testament, but it's not directly linked to the scene in Job 1 and 2.